you gonna do when they come for you?
Better days, hey, better days. Got me thinking about better days. Better days, better days, better days. Hey.
Don't vote the bad PPP, vote GPP. Vote the G.
Thank you once again for joining me on this program, Together We Will. I'm looking for your phone calls today just to discuss our nation, where we're at today, where we want to be tomorrow. And, you know, as you look around your living rooms, is there hope? You know, what is your hope for our country? You know, recently our students have been studying for CXCs. I know they have major exams coming up in May and June. As you think of all of the blackouts we've had around at least the Georgetown area and some of the outlying areas, you've got to wonder who is paying attention to the future of our country, which is our children. If we're not taking care of them today, how will we take care of them tomorrow? So we've got a lot of things to discuss. We believe that Guyana is ready for a new direction. We believe that we must come together to make this happen. You know, yesterday, the president walked around the cricket ground with our famous cricketer, most famous cricketer, Shivnarine Chandapal. And as you know, as he walked around, I looked at the response from the crowd and realized that here's a man that had a good opportunity to ensure that we have a better nation, a better infrastructure to take us into the 21st century that we're in today. But lots of money have been squandered. I mean, it was in Wakenham 2 weekends ago, and the complaints were the same. You know, the roads were done 5 times, but it still have been broken up again. It has to be done once more. So we've got to change the direction. We've got to change the economics. There are 3 things that are important, I believe, as we travel around the country. Economics is the main one, security, and the constitutional change, where people are asking to put the power back into the hands of the people. Let the local communities run their communities. Taxes that is collected from those communities, a major portion ought to remain in those communities for development. You know, also in Wakenham, when I was there, I may have mentioned this before, but an investor brought in equipment 9 years ago to open a sawmill. And after 9 years of trying to get approval to run that sawmill, millions of US dollars worth of equipment is still sitting there in Wakenham. Thousands of jobs over the last 9 years have been lost with no good explanation. And when I looked at some of the local people eyes when they told me that story, you just felt it. You felt a pain that, wait a minute, why can't we be working together to make our nation a better place? With me today is a very popular figure in our country, Dr. JOF Haynes, has been on the television on his own program, on Channel 67. He's been around the political circle, the business circle, the social, the sports circle, quite a bit. And Dr. Haynes, thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you, and a very good afternoon to our listeners and viewers.
Joe, you live in Linden. You're in Georgetown quite often. I mentioned economics, and I've spoken about Linden on this program before. What are we seeing or needs to happen in order to energize our country, that where no one is left behind, especially when it comes to prosperity and job opportunities for people?
Well, a very good afternoon to our friends out there, and I like the motto, Together We Will. Together we must, Peter. We must together hold hands with those persons out there who are jobless in Linden, very much so. We're talking about Linden. I can talk about what's happening around the country too. I smiled earlier because when you said no one should be left behind, I remembered the slogan used in the schools.
Yes.
No kid should be left behind. But if we were to look at just that, no child is left behind, just speaking that out of what's happening in Linden, and we were to promote everyone that fails or hasn't achieved the level to go forward, then what are we producing for our future in this nation? So we have to somehow find ways and means of filling the spaces, the blanks that so vastly exist in our communities. For instance, in Linden, we're talking about Linden. It's a sad state of affairs in Linden. For many years, Peter, many years, decades, Linden has been basically left alone. And you've got generations that have come along since then that are just you look around at the faces of those people. It's
Despair.
it's like they're just in a trance. Maybe they're shocked at the fact that for so many years no one really looked at them. There's hardly any development. There's hardly any change. There are more people losing jobs on a daily basis. There are youths that are just many skillful workers who were in professional jobs are now driving taxis or driving someone's taxis, driving minibuses. We've got people who are just sitting around doing nothing all day, playing dominoes and cards.
But it's interesting, the government in 2003 commissioned a study for Linden and surrounding areas. And the German study that came back proposed some significant transformation, economic transformation. Tiger Hill Falls for hydro, turning it into a manufacturing hub, doing the road to Brazil, all of those things. And you wonder why have we, as a nation, and even as a government, neglected such a large community. Is it? I mean, a lot of people say, well, maybe there's vengeance there. But when you're one person, Lyndon told me, he says, if you ever become president, Mr. Ramsaroop, make sure you're president for all of Guyana. And I don't see that in Lyndon. It's one of the most depressed communities that I've been to in a long time.
It is, and I think one of the things that you will have to do, Peter, in government is to decentralize what happens. Because I think somehow we should look at the model that exists, a successful model that exists. For instance, if I were to become president, I would decentralize the whole process. I would have a governor responsible for Region 10.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And that governor has to report to me in Parliament as the president to let me know what plans you have to develop your region.
And as I mentioned earlier in the program, taxpayers' money that coming from those regions
goes back into the region to continue to develop and continue to promote and to harness and to enhance the face of the community or the region. I think that is a very you talked about in your ad. You talked about looking at the Constitution.
Yes.
I think that is a very serious issue needs to be looked at. I think you take so much out of the regions and you put back so little. That's what's happening to Region 10. So much of is coming out of Region 10. Every day you're seeing those 40-foot containers moving in and out, but there's no goods coming in. There are things that are coming out. You see, and you keep taking out the bauxite. You say, well, we employ people, yes, but you're taking out the commodities.
Raw materials, yes.
And you're not putting back anything into the region.
And if we solve energy, that raw material can stay right there in Linden and produce aluminum.
Exactly.
Why send it out to Guyana?
Well, no one is going to come here to look at aluminum, Peter, because we don't have the facilities to provide electricity enough to take care of a smeltering plant.
But we ought to be looking at those solutions.
We should be putting out a finished product.
Yes.
Instead of sending the raw materials out that you're raping the country, we sending the gold out, we sending the bauxite out, we sending the timber out. This is all Region 10 basically. You're taking so much out of the region, and who benefits from it? Not those people who are walking the streets looking around like they're zombies, that are playing dominoes day and night, that are playing cards, that are doing all sorts of things, that are trying to survive. They're not the ones that are benefiting.
And all they have asked for is the opportunity to do better. Give me the opportunity, I will do better. I look at when folks land in New York City or Trinidad or Barbados. Once they got that opportunity, they do well. And families around Guyana know that their relatives are doing well because they get some of that money back. Of course.
People are leaving here, going abroad, Peter, doing 3 and 4 jobs. They have no jobs here. But I don't know if they're trying to make up for all the jobs that they haven't had here. But they go to the States and they're doing 3 and 4 jobs.
It was interesting looking at the papers last week when the president and the presidential candidate for the PP went to New York. And they had about maybe 200 people at their function. And it was all supporters who left under this regime to go for a better life in another country.
And who are not coming back.
And I kind of smiled to hear the president and the presidential candidate telling those folks how great Guyana is. But they left under their regime. These were not older generation. But I want to switch to sports for a second. I had a question on my Facebook. And the person asked, well, why don't we have a national sports policy in Guyana? Why don't we have integrated sports in schools anymore? What are we teaching our children about camaraderie and competitiveness and interracial connection? Why are we not doing that, Joe? I mean, That disappoints me.
That when you talk about sports, my skin grew, Peter. If I had to do anything in this country, in the ministry, I would love to be the sports minister. I'm telling you, sports has to become an industry in this country. Sports is looked at as something to do. Sports is an industry that needs to be developed and begun or started in kindergarten, even in the cradle.
But it helps build leadership skills.
What you're doing is enhancing your community. Number one, you're developing the person. You're holistically developing the person. That is an area that is left out in many children. The kids that are coming up. I mean, we talk about interrelations, getting along with each other. We're talking about harmony or harmonizing people. One of the greatest tools that is used to harmonize people is sports. When your team wins, Peter, it's every family. It doesn't matter what race, what color, what religion. When your country wins, it's everybody.
But the sad part, I look at some of the associations. I was the president of the Guyana Table Tennis Association. We have to beg for money for sponsorship just to get our children competing against United States and Puerto Rico.
Peter, if it's not cricket, no ministry develops anything else but cricket here. Everything else has to be driven by the private sector. We're not saying that the government needs to be getting involved in promoting every sport, but give the tools, provide the necessities like the land for certain things, the grounds. Give business people incentives so that when they commit to sports, they will benefit from it.
Tax deduction or something
give them
like
something,
that.
because look, if you look around at the countries that are successful in sports, the government is ultimately involved in not necessarily providing the tools for sports, but providing the foundation, laying the foundation, so the private sector can take it and run with it.
And you look at some of our children, as you said, the young people in Linden playing dominoes all day long. When a student comes home in the afternoon, if you had even an extra hour of sports at the school level, we used to have I grew up with inter-school competitions with cricket and football and bundle. I don't see those things happening as much.
I wanted to say something. I spoke with a friend of mine who came back for the town week. Right, we go up together basically, and I'm looking along the Damar River. Peter, we don't even have a kayak team in Guyana. We have some of the most beautiful rivers and falls, and we can have those persons like the Amerindians who are skillful at canoeing. I mean, those people should be out there canoeing for gold medals. We talk about we don't even talk about gymnastics here anymore. Forget about that. That's forgotten. We should be involved in gymnastics. We have the temperature, the weather. We have the foods here that can nutrify the children if the parents can afford to buy it. Many parents around this country, Peter, cannot afford to buy the foods that are required to provide for the children so they can become good sportsmen and women.
And just something came to my mind last week. A young child asked somebody next to me for $100 for lunch. But the child had a lunch kit in their hand. So the individual next to me says, well, why you need $100 to have a lunch kit? So to open the lunch kit was a mango. One mango was in that lunch kit.
And that kid probably picked it up from some tree
for that
somewhere.
child's lunch, after going to school for 8 hours a day with one mango, and then come home and black out and all these things. But it's how do we create that culture of excellence? This is not about criticizing the today. What we're fighting for is a better today. We want that culture of excellence, that pride, that sense of duty, that commitment to country, the patriotism. But in order for that hope to come, we've got to give the tools.
Well, I want to say something else, Peter, to add to what you're saying. I believe that many of the parents, many of the seniors, the supporters of children today, even the children, have lost vision. They've lost the vision. They're just existing basically.
The despair is taken over into the next generation.
Yeah, it goes from generation to generation. There is nothing really substantial to fight for. They're just drifting through life.
I was in Bartica a weekend ago, and one woman came up to me and she said, Mr. Ramsaroop, I'm a single mother. I applied for a piece of land in 7 Mile Pataro, which is right outside of Bartica, but I've got to come up with $500,000 for that piece of land. Yeah. She says, how would I even buy the land? How would I even have a mortgage to build the house? So that hope and that despair in her eyes, knowing that she needs a home for her child, but knowing she can even buy a piece of land that is rightfully hers. Every land in this country is our land. You should have to pay the government. The government doesn't own this land. It's our land.
If you are in a position in the next administration, and I hope you are, to make a decision about land in this country, every child that's been born in this country, one of the things that you should guaranteed a piece of land, guaranteed for life. As long as you live and you get to a certain age, you take that family, pick that land out, and you sign that document. Says, this is the land that belongs to this child. And one thing I would ask you to also do is to start a fund that as long as this child stays a certain level, grows up, stays a certain level in school, that something will be contributing towards the future of that child. You know, we've got enough land here to take care of many Caribbean countries, their children and our children and other children.
Well, why don't we treat ourselves right first?
The problem we have here is that we try to hold on to everything so much, so close for ourselves, that we fail to realize that in order for us to be able to succeed in this country, we have to let go and share it. You know, we have a situation here where people are being given a piece of land that they can barely build a house on. If a fire come, God forbid, they burn the whole street down.
But the fact is, I mean, we don't have guaranteed loans for their houses.
How are they going to be able to pay the loans back?
And their jobs are $30,000 a month.
We have one of the highest unemployment rates in the Caribbean. How are we going to be able to pay a loan back? Then we have the VAT that is eating people out. 16%.
And Joe, that's why one of the reasons when I stepped into the political circle as a business person that says Guyana can change. I've lived around the world. You have lived across the world. We're back in our country where we have spent years trying to develop the best way we can. The big change is necessary, economic transformation. We can do it here. I told the president many times, I've seen him, he says, Mr. President, you've traveled to China, you've traveled to the United States, you've traveled to Trinidad, you've Barbados, all these countries. Why when you come back you don't get angry and says, you know what, I can do that in my country. I can make my country better. When I go to New York, I can tell those 200 people that showed up, you know what, you guys left at the wrong time. Had you just stayed another year, here's where you would have been. But wait a minute, what happened? Why have the politicians that we have let govern our country lose touch with what I believe they went in for, was to do better?
I don't believe they lost touch, Peter. I believe that they were never true humanitarians.
Well, it's sad.
If you are a true humanitarian and a servant, because government officials should be servant to the people. If you are a true humanitarian, you could not forget that. Because when you look around you, it's those people who put you where you are.
You know, and it's funny to go back to my Bartica story. One family that let me in their home, they'd give me food and everything in Bartica. They looked at me and said, Mr. Ramsaroop, if you come back here in any form of government and what you just told us, you don't deliver, don't come back in my yard. But here we see, you know, folks, politicians going around in the current regime, getting garland when the people are suffering. You know, we've got to have that hope. And I think binding together, I realize people want to change. You know, the government has run out of ideas. They know that they're not getting what we deserve as a nation. How do we make that change? Let's switch to crime and security.
No, don't even talk about crime.
But security is a foundation of peace. Security is a foundation of economic change. Security is a foundation of how our country develops into a developed state. We've got to get a handle on security.
You know, Peter, I think the greatest fear of any business person in this country, the greatest fear is the crime, the criminal coming into their lives and invading their privacy. I think that's one of the greatest fears. The average business person in this community, in this country, in Guyana, that is one of the greatest fears they have. And we have not been able to put any sort of mechanism in place for so many years to control that, to stop that from happening. But you know, it goes back to what we're talking about. The greatest fear that exists is the criminal entering your domain. The reason why it's like that, Peter, is because of the fact that we have the greatest unemployment probably in the hemisphere around here.
Yes.
There's so many people walking the streets that are not working.
And the unemployment, much less the underemployment. The underemployment, you know, you're selling at border market, you're barely getting enough money to buy your food for the next day, if that much.
Peter, I go
Yes.
to the marketplaces many times, and I look at those people, and I see the sad look on their faces. But sad to say that some of these people will continue to contribute to this process. For some reason, I don't know what, if they're brainwashed or I don't understand.
But-
they're not able to even pay their bills. They're not even sustain their families, but yet still they're going to go right back and make another contribution to the same garbage. I don't understand the mentality.
But we have to, I mean, and that's where I think programs like this, and as we travel around the country and we talk to people from Linden to Bartica to Wickenham, to Essequibo to Quarantine, is the fact that we've got to believe in Guyana. And I think if we renew that dream, as I mentioned, the Guyanese dream, we renew that dream and believe that we own our land. It is for us to make it better. Not the government, not the politicians, it's for us to make it better, Joe. So security, economic change, national sport policies, renewing that dream, creating that culture of excellence is going to depend on how we put our vote. It goes down to not just the voting. Voting is just one exercise. But the fact is, when you vote, you can't just step away. You've got to be engaged.
Yes.
You've got to be part of the
You have to
system.
stay engaged.
You've got to be able to put your ideas. When that woman told me she can't afford $500,000 a piece of land in Bartica, that got to me. Is wait a minute, what would I have done with the $500,000 as government? I've collected all of the gold, VAT and taxes coming out of the Bartica Triangle. Yet I'm going to tax those same people that is processing all of that gold of our country and make them pay $500,000 for house lot. You talk about servants. Any politicians you vote for in this country ought to be a servant of society. If they're not, if they're there to rule you, you have made a bad decision.
The one thing I want to leave again, Peter, with people who, many persons would have seen me on programs. I've been doing it since 1995 on television in Guyana, and no one made me come back to Guyana. And I can go out of Guyana anytime I need to, because I came back here as a servant to my people. I love my country, and I love, what my greatest, my greatest achievement in my work, Peter, is for me to look at someone who could not hardly do anything for themselves, that after a few weeks or a few months, I'm looking at that person doing everything they can for themselves. That is where I get my inspiration. And I think you as a politician, you as a businessman, your greatest achievement factor should be looking at someone who was impoverished, that couldn't afford to buy not even a plate of food to put on their table, that within weeks or months you can look at that person and see them going grocery shopping, holding hands with their children, entering a vehicle. Why can't we have people doing those things? The average person, you talk about $500,000, the average Guyanese person in this country cannot afford $50,000 to buy a piece of land. They can't find it.
But it's our dream. It's our dream to have a better life in our country. And I think why so many of us have returned, so many folks are in Guyana, is we do believe in our country. But somehow, you mentioned earlier in the program, we may have lost despair. We are in despair. We may have lost the hope. But the fact is, we cannot lose the hope, because if we lose the hope, much less our young generation, those young children going to school, preparing for the common entrance, for the CXEs, if we lose our hope, for those watching the program, then we have done a disservice to that next generation. And we need that next generation, Joe, to be able to take care of us as we get older.
Because we as the longer we live, the older we get. And
Yes.
it's like the generations that are coming up has to take over.
Yes.
What are we leaving for those children?
Let's take one call. I know we're running up. We missed that. But as we look at the three things we opened the program with: economics. We need an economic transformation, renewing the dream, modernization of our known industries, but also creation of new industries.
And you've got a very beautiful plan.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about that in the program. The constitutional change, I think we need to try to make sure the folks are understanding. We want power back in the hands of the people.
Yes.
Not an executive president or a government that runs it. It has to go back into the hands
And
of the
give
people.
power to the regions.
The regions.
Give them the power to be able to develop their communities.
Yes. Yes, you're on the air. Can I help you? You with Dr. Haynes?
I just minister and they are making big Buckingham Palace for themselves and leading the people and taking all the money, use it for themselves.
Well, make sure that doesn't happen. Thank you. The caller try to say that somebody is taking all of their money.
But they're seeing it every day.
Yes.
You know, they're paying all the taxes, they're paying all the VATs, they're paying everything else, and then they're not getting anything in return.
Yes.
You know, I mean, it's happening. It's not like you're pulling a blanket over their eyes. They're
Yes.
seeing it every day.
Yes. And I think the folks realize that the change has to happen.
But they have to contribute to the change.
Yes.
You know, I mean, we listen to people complaining all the time, but then they go right back and contribute to the same thing they're complaining about.
But and what I'm asking all of the viewers is, this time around,
Make a difference. Let it be
why
different.
not give the change a chance? Why not? One time, ensure that the establishment that has failed us doesn't fail us anymore.
You know what I'd like to see?
Uh-huh.
I'd like to see a document put out to the public that if we promise as politicians all of these things and we don't deliver
contract.
anything within a contract, within a certain time frame, that you fire them.
Absolutely.
I'd like to see
Absolutely.
that.
Or we resign. I mean, I made that commitment. I said, if anything that I have said, and it's public and it's in a contract, and you don't deliver it in the time frame you said.
We should have a contract like that.
Yes, absolutely. Yes, you're on the air.
Hi, good
Yeah.
afternoon.
Good afternoon.
If you want to feel sad, you have to go by the public hospital,
Uh-huh.
and then you would see what is really going on in this country.
But we know what is happening there.
Dr. Haynes as a
We know
medical
what is happening
specialist
here.
here.
Oh,
I think see it every day.
Oh, man.
Yes.
Yes, but the public hospital is the worst place to look at.
Oh man.
Well, that's the way we treat our citizens. And you know, the fact is, anytime a politician gets sick, guess what? You don't see them going to the public hospital. Either they're flying out of the country or they're going to a private hospital.
They may go, but they may not stay.
But you know, you shouldn't have something in the nation that you can't use. As a government, Joe, you kept mentioning servantship. If you're not serving society, you have to be like the people. And you've got to be able to feel that pain. We'll take one last phone call. Yes, you're on the air. Yes?
Crime and security, right?
Crime?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
In a country, crime is one of the most important things.
Yes, we said we've got to resolve crime.
This Shima Manga, father, you're an phone.
Yes.
And in a country, when you get security, you got no country. Baro, Mr. Roy talking.
Thank you very much. You know, the fact is we've got to be able to solve the crime.
Not only talk about
Yeah.
security, we
Yeah.
have to be able to put mechanisms in place to protect our citizens.
Yes.
Because
yes.
those are the people who are helping to contribute to the development of the country. Are you going to put their lives at stake? For the last few years, Peter, I'm watching the last few weeks, I pick up the newspaper, every single day almost is a crime.
Yeah.
And it's a crime against the business people, the business sector, the people who are coming back home. I mean, what are we doing?
Joe, we better close. We've got all the calls coming in. It's a quick half-hour program.
It's a little too short.
I know. What is the one thing you want to leave with our viewers?
It's time for us as Guyanese to wake up, become real, understand the realities of life. Look at where we are today. Look at where we want to go. And if you're not happy with where you are and you want to go someplace, it's time for change. Change is necessary. Change must come. You don't want to change, you're not going to progress. You don't want to change, you're not going to be able to get better security. You're not going to be able to get better health. You're not going to be able to get better economics. You know, you can't get the job. You don't want to bring about change, then you're going to continue to suffer.
Thank you, Joe, Dr. Haynes, for joining me on the program. You know, visit our website, voteg.com. Be part of this transformation. You know, when you see your children tonight and you kiss them goodnight, you know, remember the fact that we're fighting for that new generation. Our Guyanese dream is a duty of hope, a sense of pride. You know, when we sing that national anthem, I mention every time, we ought to feel that tingle in our system. We've got to put patriotism and that sense of duty, renew the dream, create competitive environments in our nation so that we can have jobs, change our constitution in order to put the power back into the hands of the people, ensure a tax system that is an incentive for development, not a noose around our neck. And as we study Guyana today, and as we think of what we need Guyana to look like tomorrow, it is for all of us to step back, step in together, and put